Hey guys, welcome back to the Stop Renting podcast. Switching up the podcast studio again. Don't have Kara with me today on the Stop Renting podcast. We have Kelly Zaccaria, one of the
Hey
agents at
everyone.
our brokerage here. So, yeah, we're gonna go through. Kelly's gonna introduce ourselves. I want to start doing this thing where we do like meet your agent. So we'll have a podcast with each of our agents just so they can talk to us about why they do real estate, what's it like for them, and then hopefully have some fun and interesting stories, which, if you look at the title, Kelly does have from the joys of working with a flat fee brokerage. So we're going to go through and see how that went and why flat fee brokerages are an awesome part of our industry and why everybody should use it. Yeah. So Kelly, starting out, thank you for coming on. If you could tell us a little bit about your journey in real estate, when you started, how it's going. And yeah, we'll go from there.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rod. My name's Kelly. Nice to meet everyone. I'm originally from New Jersey, North Jersey. I went to college at the University of Central Florida in Orlando. I graduated with a finance major, took some real estate classes, got my real estate degree my last semester of senior year, and hopped right into the business as soon as I graduated and moved to Sarasota, Florida, where couldn't be happier. We live in one of the best places in the country by far. Moved here with my family, and now I've been in real estate for about 3.5 years. Started my career as an assistant to a team lead, and now I've recently moved into a full agent role and have been loving it and super excited to be
Killing
here
it.
and with Shoreline Realty. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and I love helping clients, and this is my passion.
Yeah, it's awesome. So we obviously we're super excited. Kelly worked with us at our previous brokerage, where she was like she said, an assistant to the team lead. And then when we came over and started our own brokerage, Kelly came on with us as a full agent and has been doing a great job. Obviously, starting out as an assistant is a huge benefit. She definitely learned from a lot of great agents. So yeah, super excited to have her and excited that she's doing great with us. Cool. So when you left college, you said you did your, I know we've talked about it, but it's in finance. Your degree was in finance, right?
Yeah, I was a finance major and a sports management minor. So I worked for the New York Jets, doing marketing and everything that made the games and all of the experiences run, all of their events that they hosted. I would run them and run the games and learned a lot. And it was an awesome experience and something I'm truly grateful to have been a part of. Very lucky. And then I took some real estate classes. I've always loved it. Me and my mom growing up at the Jersey Shore, just something that we I always loved. And I decided to get my license while I was in college studying, with 2 degrees, and then came out and moved to Sarasota and started my career
Here
here,
we
and I
are.
absolutely love it. Yeah, here we are.
Yeah.
It's
No, and you
awesome.
have a Kelly has a great personality for it. And
Yeah,
I think one of the things that I love the most about Kelly is her ability to like match people's energies and is fantastic. I've seen her talk to very upset people, very happy people, and everything in between, and as a great ability to, yeah, just to match people's energy, people's vibe, and that's paramount in our industry to be able to.
thank
I wouldn't say it's not even like faking it. Just you're naturally like when you're talking to somebody else, you want them to be on the same wavelength, and we meet a
meet
lot of new
people
people. Yeah, you
all over
meet
the
people.
country.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so Kelly's amazing at that, and obviously it's one of the successes, one of the reasons she's successful. And obviously like her education and then what she did beforehand. So, yeah, is there what else in terms of So what's your favorite cliche and all, but like, what's your favorite part about doing real estate? Obviously, we get to meet different people, see beautiful houses. There's a lot of flexibility. So, what would you say? I guess the second question is going to be what's the hardest part about real estate, but what's your favorite part about real estate to start with?
yeah. My favorite part is making the transition easy for people, making their dreams come true. Whether it's a first-time home buyer, a snowbird, a retiree who's now getting to come to Florida after 60 years of working their entire life, and getting to truly see people make their dreams come true. I
Yeah.
have a client right now moving from New York, and she's letting her kids. She's so excited for them, and it just truly makes me happy that I get to be a part of that and make someone's dreams come true.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's again, guys, it sounds cheesy, but it is like I have a same thing. Like I have a client, they're a young couple, they're buying their house, and like they're buying new construction, and at one point the husband, the younger man, was like, "Rod, don't you're not leaving us, right?" Because it seemed like it was going to be a like I wasn't going to be a part of it anymore, but it was just a miscommunication. I was like, "No, no, no, I'm here." Like, "Oh, thank God, man! Like you're helping us so much," and that is like a really rewarding feeling because obviously, like at any whether it's your first home or your retirement or whatever it is, real estate is very stressful, especially in different states, right? Like
Yeah.
so. That is a really rewarding feeling. So as
Got a
cliche
text.
as cheesy as it sounds, it is a nice feeling.
It is. I got a text yesterday from one of my buyers that said, the past 2 weeks has been so stressful. I haven't been able to breathe. And today was the first day that I was able to breathe. And it's because of you. And it just those little things that, it makes you happy that you're doing something with purpose.
Yeah,
And yeah,
100%. And there's yeah, well said. Cool. So yeah, that's Kelly, and I appreciate. Oh, I almost forgot. What's
the
the
hardest
hardest
thing.
part? The
Yeah.
hardest thing about real estate, since people think all we do is open doors and collect checks,
Yeah.
which is not true. We
Definitely
do a
not.
very important job.
Yeah.
So what was the hardest? What is the hardest part that you've seen day to day with real estate that you could share with us?
Yeah, the hardest one of them is making sure when you have a transaction that we actually get to that closing table. You think it's the hardest part is to get under contract, but truly one of the hardest parts is to stay under contract and hand those keys over and say, this is your home. So there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that, our clients don't see every day. And it's just getting all of that worked out and making sure. But that's why we have a team and lenders and vendors that help us get to that finish point. And that's why it's truly important who you work with so that you have those special people to make the deal happen.
100%. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
agree with that. That is one of the. I have right now that I'm going through a massive issue. I know the one you're talking about. We're gonna circle back to it with the flat fee people, but yeah, just wild story. Like I have one right now. We did the inspections and the AC is like covered in mold,
Ooh.
and the seller doesn't feel like that's a big enough issue to to fix. So yeah, it's
And the AC is important. It's part of the
yeah,
footprint.
AC is a massive important. Mold happens in Florida without proper ventilation. So yeah, to your point, having staying under contract and making sure everybody's happy and protecting your buyer or your seller, whatever side you're on,
People
throughout
get
that
anxious
process.
process and
Yeah.
you get worried, are they going to want to back out for the little things? And
Hmm.
it's keeping them, you know, level headed and that it will be okay. We're going to get this fixed. I had an
Hmm.
AC, a few weeks ago too, and it almost made my buyer back out, but you just have to say it'll be okay. And, we got the AC fully paid for by the sellers. And, now she closed and is happy in her new home.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, and I agree, that's the hardest part is being able to, because obviously in real estate, it's a lot of money, a lot of like things moving very quickly.
Hmm.
And you have to be able to be the one to be like, hey, this is what it looks like, this is the situation, this is what it looks like, but this is like the reality, this is how we can move forward. um Obviously it's up to you as the buyer or the seller, but this is what I would suggest, looking at it from a third party, very new, not a third party, but like from the outside, very neutral perspective. And as we know, there's like agents that get emotionally involved, and that's not good. You should
That's the
stay
number
out
one
of.
is not to put your emotions in. You think you're such a nice person or you feel bad for somebody and you
Yeah.
really just can't feel bad. You have to stay neutral and
Hmm. And give
represent
advice,
whoever.
yeah, because your job as an advisor, as a real estate advisor, is to give advice from like a very level-headed, professional, outside perspective, as opposed to being like in the middle of it, filled with emotions. So yeah, 100%. Cool. So Kelly has recently gone through, I think you're still kind of going through it, but a transaction where she was representing the buyer, and on the seller side, the seller had opted to go with a flat fee brokerage. I have my own personal opinion of flat fee brokerages. They suck. But Kelly, I thought no, and me and Kelly have been talking about this one for the last few weeks, and I thought, hey, this is going to be a great one. Let's make a podcast episode so people understand when you as a seller are choosing to save money by instead of hiring like what we call a full service brokerage like ours, where yes, you pay a full commission or close to a full commission, but you get like an actual listing agent, as opposed to saving 1 or 2% by going with a flat fee brokerage. So
They
I
sale
thought
by owner.
I thought a for sale, yeah, which basically translates to being a for sale by owner. So
Yeah.
um Kelly's going through that right now. She's representing the buyer. And I thought it would be a great time to have her on now that it's like a fresh in her mind. What the process is like where are the pitfalls, what the dangers. I think that's the biggest part is like what the dangers are to the seller by putting themselves either in a for sale by owner or a flat free situation to try to, because all you're really trying to save is 1 or 2%. So with all that spiel said.
Yeah.
What specific issues arose during the transaction with the flat fee brokerage that made it particularly difficult? I know there was a few, but what was like the main thing that like just said like, oh God, I wish there was a listing
And
agent
it's also teach because I don't know if agents also understand what they're going to be taking on when they're also dealing with a
here. Hmm.
flat fee. That's a whole other side besides the buyer and the seller. Um, but in this case, the seller was very uneducated, and so it puts me my fiduciary duty is to the buyer, but now I'm only that point of contact, and so the
Hmm.
seller is only talking to me and I have to answer all of these questions. And she was very uneducated, her and her family. So every day I would receive texts and emails saying, what's this, what's that, and it was a big challenge just because I'm not wanting to give all the answers to her. I need to
No,
represent my buyer. And that was
I know you asked me. I know there was a few of them that you like asked me, and I'm like, don't answer that. Like that's like we because again, I'm the broker, so my job is to obviously with like our agents to make sure that whatever questions or information they're giving out to either party is legally like okay. Like we're not being unethical, we're not making any mistakes. That's the point of like brokerage. And there were some questions that the seller was asking Kelly. I'm like, do not answer that. Like,
yeah,
just ignore her because that's not your client is the buyer, not the seller. And that question, if you answered it one way or the other, is putting you in a position where you're almost representing the seller, which you're not. You're that's not your job in this situation. So,
exactly. Like three
that's
weeks in,
interesting.
yeah, 3 weeks in, she randomly texted me about, oh hey, can I have the EMD? Can I have the buyer's pre-approval? I said, one, that was already sent, and but two, that we're 3 weeks in, nothing can change that. And if you had an agent representing you, these are updates you would have gotten
Yeah.
within a minute of receiving the receipt for the earnest money deposit. So it's those
And just so
things
everybody
that,
understands that their earnest money is due within 3 days. So asking for it 21 days later is absolutely redundant. Because if the buyer doesn't send it within the first 3 days, then this deal falls apart. So again, something a listing agent should have told her. But yeah,
yeah. And also on that side, there's no, we all know the deadlines of the contract of when, is financing approved, did the CD get signed, and those are all things that we ask when we are representing a client. And maybe that didn't go so smooth with my buyer, and she was in the dark completely, had no idea until 2 days before closing. And so if you had representation, she's packing up her life to move to another country with the chance that
it
this
doesn't work.
might not go through.
Yeah,
And luckily, because my buyer has great representation and a great team, that we made it work, and I was able to convey to the seller, this is what we're doing. There was
yeah,
no real option for the seller. This I said, this is the next steps, and
yeah,
you're either going to have to agree to it, or you don't have another option really, because
yeah.
the sellers aren't allowed
I
to
think
back
you
out.
said it. Yeah, I think you said it perfectly. And I think we can, within reason, obviously without names, but I think we can go into some detail and I think we should on like what actually happened so that people understand why the danger of, and I always like to say it, but like if you're using a flat fee brokerage, maybe you're saving 1 or 2%, maybe, depending on your purchase price. But then what are the costs of that? Like, right, you're saving here, but what's it actually costing? And I think you said something beautiful. Yeah, I know. I think so. Like being in the dark, I think that's massive because obviously you're a good agent and you're like answering some of her questions, but in the reality, you didn't have to answer any of her questions. You could have just been. I know it's good that you did it because obviously it helped move the transaction along, but legally speaking, you didn't have to answer her. So yeah, it puts the seller as completely in the dark for
Yeah, and it
everything.
puts us in a hard position because if I don't answer that, I don't want to answer her, but if I don't answer her, there's no communication back and
Hmm.
forth. There's no one for me to talk to, so I have to talk to her. Any
Yeah,
addendums that we had, anything that needed to be switched, I was now in control of their emails, sending them the paperwork, saying, "Hey, I just sent you this. This is what's happening." And
Yeah.
normally, we're not talking to both parties. So that was definitely a change, and the sellers have to
Yeah.
understand that.
And I think, yeah, to your point, it's like if the yeah, just it's just such a wild thing for me to try to understand like why people would do that. But either way, it's like you're putting yourself at such a massive disadvantage. So, and I guess we can touch up on it a little bit, but basically we were supposed to close, was it tomorrow? Okay, and then you say the story, I guess, a little better. But what happened and what happened and what was the result? Where are we at now?
Yeah, late Friday afternoon, I received a call from my buyer who said, "Hey, we're in a little bit of a trouble." Um, they were missing the lender, kept looking for a paycheck, and you have to have a certain amount of time working before you are
Mhm.
going to be able to buy a house. And there was two paychecks missing. She was able to find the one, but the one didn't exist because they were on vacation that week. Um, and it's that 1 week really changes your debt to income, and that messed up things a lot. They were able to send a letter of describing where they were and
The
why they,
vacation.
on vacation. This was the situation. Um, and then a few hours later, at 9:30 at night on a Friday, I got a call from the lender saying, "Hey, this is what's going on. I'm really trying to do everything here to make this happen. I'm going to work overtime tomorrow, Saturday. Luckily, the underwriters are the ones that this is who we need to, show." And yes, even though if the lender thinks that everything's okay and it's all fine, it's the, government, and legally the
Yeah.
underwriter can't put their head towards this. So that's the interesting. And then Monday, they tried everything to get this buyer to be able to purchase, because 3 days before closing is you need the CD to be
Hmm.
signed. And if that doesn't get signed, they can't close on
They have
Thursday.
to push it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the major
And
challenge, is
the whole time the seller had no idea what was going on. Like
not a clue.
four, 3 or 4 days before closing, the deal's falling apart,
Yep.
and the seller
And
has no idea.
the
The
hardest
seller
part
who's
was,
planning to move their whole life to Panama on
exactly, is that
Friday.
I know the seller's situation now. I know that they're moving to a whole other country. They have 3 kids, pregnant with another, that they need this money. And so, because I'm a good person, this is where, as an agent,
Yeah.
putting your feelings on the burner, because you are representing the buyer, is that I can't feel bad for her. If they had representation, maybe their agent would have checked in and said, "Hey, why don't we have the CD signed? Why isn't this?" And got those updates, where now she knows nothing.
Yeah.
And so Monday they tried, can somebody else purchase the house? And that would have been an option, but that still is going to extend closing about two
Closing.
weeks. So that was, crazy. And then Tuesday, we're still waiting. And, or no, Monday. It was Monday. She texted me at 2 o'clock, "Hey, just signed the closing docs." And I'm like, "Oh no, how am
No, I remember
I?"
that text. Like, oh, that's not good.
That's not good. And if I was her, because I answered, pretty quickly. So if she knew that I didn't answer, I'm like, but I think she was,
Yeah.
preoccupied. It probably didn't cross her mind.
That's
But, I feel
terrifying.
bad now. How do I prepare to say this to her for them to not freak out either? We need both parties to stay as calm, because there is always a solution. It may not be when we want it to be, but there will be a solution.
Yeah, which it looks like within reason. I think you've come up with a. We don't have to go into details with the solution, obviously, because like fiduciary stuff. But yeah, it's just wild to me how like it's just sad, right? Because the seller is like you said, moving their whole lives. There's so much big things hanging on one little real estate transaction to not to not put yourself, yeah,
To
to
buy
try to
their
save.
rental, to buy their car, and they need that on Thursday, and
Yeah.
it breaks my heart.
You did find a solution, yeah. You found a solution, but I.
But it wasn't until Tuesday that I let her
Mhm.
know, "Hey, this is the situation. We're not closing on Thursday." And she did take it very well, and which took a weight off my
Yeah,
shoulders. But and we did come up with a solution. But had she had an agent, she could have known this, and they could have checked in. And that's our jobs, is we make sure every deadline, know when the deadlines are coming, and keep constantly asking, are we at the spot that
Yeah.
we should be to be able to
What's
close
missing?
on time and without having
She
an
didn't have that. Yeah.
and it's and if you understand the transaction, it could be different. And I get maybe saving the money. I still don't, but if you truly have no idea what goes on
Yeah.
in a
It's even worse.
transaction, you seriously need representation because it's just for yourself and it saves you the headache and the time. I mean, the amount of time that she kept texting me and everything, asking all these questions. If she had an agent, she would have known half of these answers and not had
Hmm.
to waste her time packing and moving up a whole house to get
No, and
this
if it
done.
would have, and the honest thing is like, so thank God that you're like I keep saying it, but like thank God that you're like a good person and a good agent and like kept the situation moving forward, like the transaction, because the reality is if she didn't have an agent review the offer. So whatever offer you wrote is the offer that she has to legally abide by. And then she
Yeah,
has to trust whatever you say about that because she doesn't know how to read it and she doesn't have a listing agent. So then you guys could have backed out today, which is Wednesday, for a transaction tomorrow. The buyer with a financing denial, which is a contingency, the buyer would have gotten their full refunds, and then the seller's up a creek. So
would have
it's
been back on the market for who knows how long.
yeah, this so terrifying. So yeah,
It is.
whatever my personal opinions of flat free, like that's just scary that you would put that much. Yeah, it's not even putting in anybody's hands. It's just like to the universe, like, oh, I hope this works out. So
Exactly.
terrifying.
And my other tip would be for the buyers also, just because a seller is unrepresented doesn't mean that you should be ever. Because in fact, a flat fee for sale by owner, that's when you're going to need the agent the most,
A hundred
is
percent.
to help you get through with someone that doesn't have representation at all. So that's just for buyers to also think about on the other
Mm-hmm.
hand of how important an agent is to, make this deal happen and get to the
No, and I
closing.
think it also, yeah, I agree 100%. And it also ties into like when people, oh, I want to speak to the listing agent. It's like you're still going in unrepresented. You don't know. I don't care how many houses you bought. It's probably still not a good idea because you're not going to know all the nuances of each specific deal and the amount of things that can go sideways. Like, look at this deal. Like, it's, oh, we're just buying a house with a mortgage, close in 4 weeks. No, there's a
Yep.
lot of other things. So,
And it's
yeah,
also
I think,
scary to realize how even up until 2 days before CD needs to be signed, something can still go wrong.
oh, yeah,
And that's just
yeah.
the thing for buyers, sellers, everyone to remember. It's truly not done until the signature is on the paper
Yeah,
at
until you're
the
done. Yeah, until the
close
warranty
deal.
deed is out. Yeah.
Exactly.
Interesting. So here's a good one. How did the flat fee brokerage's communication style or responsiveness impact the process? So how much did you actually even talk to the flat fee brokerage and how much was communication with just the seller?
Nothing. Hold on. Excuse me. He went to the liquor store and had to get the good deals.
My turn. We can edit it out. It's fine.
I heard the
That's
door.
all.
I thought he'd be home.
Where are you at? Like in the front of the house?
I'm in this little I have a little office, like where the kitchen. That's the
Oh.
laundry garage.
Oh,
Um,
okay. All right,
yes,
we'll cut
but
that out.
so
Let me ask
when
that.
it
We'll start
comes to
again.
the
Let me
flat,
ask it again.
yeah,
So, how did the flat fee brokerage's communication style or responsiveness impact the transaction process? So, it sounds like you're speaking mostly to the seller. Did you have any communication with the flat fee brokerage at the beginning?
I mean, this has been a long deal. I was actually in Italy when this started, so um, when I first submitted the offer, I guess it was a Friday, and I was in communication with the seller from when I booked the showing. She was on that
Okay.
texted me and said,
Oh, I remember. Yeah, yeah.
"You're confirmed," and then said like, "Hey, I might need an extra hour." Blah blah blah. I submitted that offer on a Friday, and she said, "Well, they're closed on the weekends, so we won't have an answer till Monday." I said, "Okay," and that is very dangerous because I'm working with the client right now that the seller took so long to answer that they've now are on to a next property and under a
Yeah,
contract somewhere else. So that's a very disadvantage for going with the flat fee if they're not going to work on the weekends. Rodrigo and I, we work 24/7, weekends, days, it doesn't matter. So
yeah.
that
Time kills
was
deals.
Yeah, and basically I submitted that offer to the flat fee email, and then she was the one that she didn't get it till Monday, and then she emailed me and said, "Hey, this is what we want from there." And honestly, from that point is I took it in my hands to get her and her husband's email and get the documents signed because I couldn't wait for this third
Yeah.
party that's not on their phones and checking emails the way we are. So that was a challenge. And basically, once we were under contract, the the flat fee email title and said, "Hey, we're do not communicate with us anymore. Please communicate with the sellers." And that's the last I've heard from them. Yeah.
Wild. Did it feel like, since you communicated so much with the seller, and I think I already know the answer, but I still want to ask, did it feel like anybody explained any part of the contract to the seller other than like the price?
No. I
Okay.
I would bet
Wild.
highly that they never even got on a phone conversation to explain the contract. I'm gonna guess that, it said these are the bullet points, maybe that,
Yeah.
and or just attached the offer and said, "Here."
So no understanding about like a financing contingency or an inspection period or earnest money. Wild. Okay. That's highly dangerous. Public universe, that's highly dangerous. Don't do that. Cool. That's interesting. So they don't work on the weekends and time kills deals and
That was my first
no.
red flag of, "Uh-oh, this is gonna be an interesting deal here."
Well, because you can set it up. You as the buyer's agent, if you're the one in charge, technically, like you're the one writing the offer, and as bad as it sounds, there's not a listing agent on the other side reviewing it. You can set your buyer up perfectly. Like, I want a 30-day inspection period. I want this. I want that. And people think it's just like the money, like the dollars, but no, there's other like contingencies and other things inside the contract.
The seller cared about was that dollar amount. They didn't
Yeah.
question one other thing besides what is that purchase price going to be.
Correct. Which, and you could have, because of everything that happened, which happens in real estate, mortgages fail all the time. You could have just backed out 2 days before, and your buyer would have gotten their full deposit back. So shocking, shocking. Okay. Um, were there any unexpected costs or hidden fees with the fat fee model that complicated the deal? Did they charge you guys anything? I don't know. I didn't hear
Well,
anything about
they when we got the off counter, they tried to have my buyer pay their $400 transaction fee.
that.
And just so you know, I mean the buyer, they have their own transaction fee that's going to go to our brokerage, and then the seller usually has theirs and it goes to theirs. Never once do you see a buyer pay both sides of the transaction fee. And
Yeah.
immediately I shut that down and said, "No, that
Not here.
needs to go." Yeah. So I
And you
think
got it charged back to the seller.
the seller paid it
Perfect.
towards the flat fee. And it was
Beautiful.
$400. I
Yeah,
think
but it's
that's
the
I'm not
principle of it.
Yeah, yeah, no. I'm not sure if there's more fees that go on behind that, but yeah, the
We
fact
haven't
that
seen anything.
she tried to I don't know who even told her to do that, but somebody.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
How did the flat fee brokerage handle negotiations compared to a traditional brokerage? So I guess there really was no negotiating with the flat fee brokerage. You
No,
negotiated directly with the seller.
yeah, no, there was never talking between me and another agent, basically just over text with the sellers. We did try to negotiate something after the inspection, and that was it was just the sellers and it didn't really go well. But
I remember that. Yeah.
yeah, that's for another
Well, I
time.
think that's a good one to point out. Side note, the one of the sellers became slightly emotional with Kelly. And I think that's not that's just wrong. You should never be getting upset with people. This is business. Like, calm down. But B, it's because they didn't have a listing agent clearly explaining things to them. So as soon as you told me that, I'm like, I'm sorry, that's obviously bad. But I feel like that's just further proof of the failure of using a flat fee brokerage, is that the gentleman got so frustrated out of his own lack of knowledge and his own lack of, it's his decision, but it was
Exactly.
because of lack of understanding what was going on, and nobody on his side to explain to him like, hey, that's totally normal, this happens, relax. So yeah, even
That he had
and that.
no an agent to explain to him, "Hey, we do have negotiations that also go on after
Mhm.
inspections if something is clearly wrong." And there were some things that definitely needed to be addressed, but and when it comes to a seller, their house is perfect and
Yeah.
nothing needs to be fixed. But
So That's
Yeah,
interesting. And I remember you told me that story, and that kind of just tied in. I remember it's like, yeah, that's that's a red. So again, if you have a good listing agent, at no point in the transaction so you get so mad that you're yelling at somebody, you as a seller, yelling at somebody on the phone. So another
exactly.
negative towards the flat fee brokerages. Okay. Did the flat fee brokerage provide adequate support for paperwork, compliance, or legal aspects of the transaction?
Not at all. I mean, like I said, that was me in my system sending them directly. I would click send, it would go to my buyer and the sellers. At the same time, I was in charge of both for, we had multiple addendums going back and forth, closing date changes, other things. So, yeah, there was no
Yeah,
paperwork. Basically, in their email, it said, hey, if there's any addendum, send it our way afterwards. So,
after it's signed.
hmm
Yeah. And so the public understands an addendum is a modification to the contract that once it's signed by both parties, it carries full legal weight. So if you sign as the seller or as the buyer, you sign for something on an addendum and you fail to meet your obligation, whether financially or whatever it is, you could help legally like liable. Like that it's legit. Like you have to pay for it or fix whatever, or do whatever you said on that paper. So the fact that again there's one agent, which is the buyer's agent, writing those up and sending them to sign to you as a seller. So unless you're a lawyer and you know how to read it, but for the regular person, as a seller, you're unrepresented. You're just signing whatever. Yeah. So very interesting one. Um, were the challenges with the buyers sellers expectations due to the flat fee model? How did you manage them? So that's a good question. Did your buyer know? I guess the seller obviously knew, but did your buyer know that it was a flat fee brokerage?
Yeah, because once they started giving us some trouble in the beginning, and basically I told her, I don't have a listing agent to communicate with. I have to directly talk to the seller. The seller's, asking a lot of questions. They understood and were very shocked by it as well. Yeah.
That's good. But again, it's to their advantage, unfortunately, but it is to the buyer's advantage because they were represented by you and the seller was not. Um, that's a good one. I guess this would be a better question for the seller, but maybe you can shed some light. How did the flat fee brokerage's marketing or listing strategies affect the transaction's outcome? So I guess the better question was, what was the original listing asking price?
A lot higher. A lot higher. They just dropped it 25,000 before we put an offer in, and we still came down 10,000. I think it was on the market quite a good amount of time, over
So
60
people,
days. So,
wild. So I get what is it like in the? I think it's like 200 now, the purchase price.
well, it was 230.
230. So imagine for like the person who's thinking of doing buy flat fee brokerage to save, okay, let's call it 2%, which is a lot you're saving if it is 2%. It's probably closer to one. But on $250,000 house, which is I'm guessing where they started originally, or maybe a little higher, call it 250. A 2% is only 5 grand. So they went all the way from 250 at a cheap with a cheap listing agent brokerage fee, and they still ended up at 230. And it sounds like after some other things even lower than that. So yes, to try to save 5 grand, you ended up losing 50, or I'm sorry, 20 or $25,000 worth of equity. So
100%. We could have marketed that property. We have a whole database of people. We could have gotten it sold way quicker, with better photos, better marketing,
yeah,
and been at the
I think
price
that
of listing.
yeah, and I think that's one of the things that when people think about flat fee brokerages, they always focus on the percentage and not on the actual like net number. And I think if people did that, it would be a lot like it would be an easier for everybody because it would be like, hey, we're offering to save you 5,000, but when in reality we're going to cost you $25,000 worth of your hard-earned equity in your home. So I think that's an interesting one. So yeah, it's a
It's a very nice house, and it definitely sold at a low price. And my buyers are
because of
getting
them.
a deal where they could have had a higher price had they got a real agent.
Got a listing. Yeah. No, and you did the right again, your job is to represent the buyer and every buyer wants to get a good house at a good price and every seller wants to sell their house at the highest price. So you did your job. Did you feel the flat free model limited the resources or tools available during the transaction? So yeah, there was no tools,
There,
right?
there was nothing, and that's what makes the job, hard on the agent too. Is we have a lot of clients, and we have a certain time for each amount of clients, and when so much of your energy and time is sucked on, because now it's both parties that and for every one text it's now two texts, for every
Yeah,
two, everything's doubled now. And now, so on the agent side, it does take up a lot more time and energy to get this deal closed. And I don't think
that's an
sellers
interesting part.
realize that them not having an agent now also puts the buyer's agent in a harder position.
Yeah, it makes it harder for everybody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which again, like we said, it makes it harder. It makes everything more difficult, harder for everybody, and there's no actual benefit to it. There's no actual savings. You're actually losing
So
money.
I'm
But
not
okay,
sure what one saving was.
yeah, there was no. And thank God that the deal didn't fall through because then it would have been even worse. Because then they would have lost
Got the
30.
price.
Yeah. And especially like when you're planning such a major move, which I'm sure they spent money on the move. So it's not only like whatever you're losing on the deal, but it's all the money that would have been lost by not being able to move. So
Yeah.
probably never use a flat fee
They had
brokerage, but if you're gonna
flights
move, if you're gonna move out of the country the next day, definitely don't use a flat fee broker.
booked.
That's so
No.
scary. Okay,
Yeah, I mean, they had flights booked that they could have, if we had to cancel, they would have had to cancel too.
lost.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
What lessons did you learn from this experience that you'll apply to future transactions with flat fee brokerages? You as a buyer's agent, I guess.
Yeah, well, it also this experience reminded me that as us agents, we don't just close deals. That we guide, protect, advocate for all of our clients. And sometimes when we think we're only representing one side, we end up doing double the work, and that's okay because this is our passion and we want to make the deal happen. But at the end of the day, whether you're buying, selling, having the right guidance can mean the difference between a successful closing and a very, very stressful one. So
100%.
and
I'm
that's
sorry.
for
Yeah.
both parties. Yeah.
100%. Um, the would you what's to say? Would you work with a flat fee brokerage again? Probably not. Like we
I
can't
would
really choose.
do everything to, and we're not allowed to steer clients or anything, but I would,
Yeah,
for their sake too, because it is difficult, I would highly suggest them choose a property that is listed by a
an
listing agent.
agent. And
Yeah.
again, I wouldn't, as a broker, I wouldn't consider that to be steering. I think that's the same way as if like a property that's not offering any buyer agent compensation or something, or for sale by owner.
Yeah.
Um, educating your buyer so the market understands. Educating your buyer is not steering. If you explain to them, hey, this seller is unrepresented. The last time I dealt with a seller like this is what happened, and this was all the negatives, and this is everything that could go wrong. So that is a perfectly reasonable thing to do to explain to your buyer, hey, if we go under contract in this specific house, because of the decisions the seller has made, these are the possible outcomes. So totally reasonable. Yeah, cool.
Thanks.
I think that about does it. Thank you,
I,
Kelly. I appreciate your time. Keep up the hard work. And yeah, we'll go from there.
thank
Thank you
you.
guys. Appreciate it.